she discovers an incredible new life in an abandoned cabin until the unimaginable happens. The sun hung high over the rolling hills of Appalachia, casting its warm embrace on Sarah and her 6-year-old daughter, Lily. They wandered deep into the vibrant wilderness, the laughter of the past week's struggles swept down by the soft breeze. As they meandered along the trails, every step felt like a momentary escape from their burdens. Sarah, a nursing assistant burdened with long hours and tight finances, and Lily, an adventurous spirit who knew only innocence and curiosity. It was then, through the dappling light filtering through the leaves, that they stumbled upon a forgotten path, one that seemed to whisper tales of old. At its end stood a cabin, abandoned yet captivating, cloaked in tall grass and memories. Its weathered facade called to Sarah, igniting a spark of possibilities she thought had long since dimmed. She envisioned a sanctuary where she and Lily could breathe, escape the relentless wheel of poverty that had defined her existence for too long. For a moment, hope fluttered in her chest, daring her to dream. But the weight of that aspiration was heavier than it seemed, suffocating the spark of enthusiasm. Could she truly find peace here when her world was one of endless struggle? As the days passed, cleaning and nurturing the cabin became her obsessive undertaking. Unpacking long-neglected boxes, she found remnants of a life she had never known, a collection of dusty letters from her grandmother, each revealing unparalleled resilience through the art of herbal medicine. The familiar scent of dried herbs filled her with a bittersweet longing for the grandmother she never met but whose echoes whispered through the pages. Was this the remedy for her family's plight? Would her grandmother's legacy serve as the bridge to a more prosperous life for Lily? Her heart raced at the possibility, but self-doubt gnawed at her. Could a nursing assistant, a single mother, really carve a niche in the herbal world? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as she committed herself to dream anew, a jarring presence disrupted her. An affluent businessman from the nearby town with his eyes set on the cabin for lucrative development. His dismissive smirk ignited a rage within her as he belittled her plans, threatening to snuff out the flicker of hope she clung to. The internal turmoil swelled. Was it worth fighting for a piece of land that seemed so small against the backdrop of her challenges? Her heart sank as he sneered, dismissing her ambition as whimsical folly. She felt her confidence melting away, tainted by his condescension. But the revelation struck hard, a thread of connection between this man and the very reason her grandmother had faced unjust hardship. A scandal. A shadow from the past that loomed over her family, threatening to repeat itself if she didn't act. Nadia had been denied recognition, her remedies forgotten. Would she suffer the same fate? With each discovery heavy on her heart, Sarah understood her battle was for more than just the cabin. It was a quest for dignity and healing, both for herself and her lineage. Driven by an intensity she didn't know she possessed, she braced for confrontation. The weight of her ancestors' struggles stirred within her, battling against the very definitions that society laid upon her. Would she have the courage to rise against oppression, or would the burdens of fear and uncertainty confine her once again? The confrontation with the businessman replayed in Sarah's mind like a record stuck on a single track, each rotation amplifying the frustrations within her. She found herself standing at the cabin's doorway, heart pounding, grappling with its implications. Would she become yet another casualty of an unfeeling system? Refusing to cower under his disdain, she inhaled deeply, the crisp air mingling with the fragrant herbs she had begun to sort around her. Nature had a way of grounding her, but this moment required more. Flipping through her grandmother's letters, vivid descriptions of wild herbs painted a picture of tenacity and skill that stirred a forgotten fierceness within Sarah. Those letters weren't merely relics, they were blueprints of survival. Insisted she suddenly see the connection as vital. Stepping outside, she let her feet guide her. Each footfall on the overgrown path rekindled plans she had nearly discarded. The businessmen wanted to exploit their home for profit, but what if instead she cultivated their land into something beneficial for her and Lily? The notion felt audacious, practically foolhardy, but in her heart, a new plan began to form. Taking out her phone, Sarah documented everything: properties of the herbs she found, ideas for potential uses, the steps she would have to take to learn. Each caption felt like a reaffirmation: this was her inheritance, an opportunity to earn a living while honoring family history. With each digital note, her confidence pierced through the layers of doubt, igniting a determination to carve a different fate. Her mind resided in a constant ebb of calculations. Could she acquire necessary knowledge in herbalism? What resources were available? Community colleges offered classes, and perhaps local markets would be open to selling tinctures and teas made from her future harvests. This would require a careful strategy, each decision carefully executed rather than impulsively made. Parallel thoughts began interweaving. As she planned her business, she reflected on how she would educate Lily about their heritage. The tales woven through her grandmother's letters could become life lessons: the resilience of women who had weathered storms before them and emerged not just unscathed but empowered. That evening, with the fading light casting a golden glow, Sarah gathered outdated pots and tools left behind in the cabin's shadows. She inspected them, transforming cautious sentiment into practical use. Each tiny action felt monumental, setting a tone for the journey ahead. With every weed she pulled and each plant she tended, a possibility bloomed, one that reached beyond her circumstances. Weeks passed, layered with successes and setbacks. Alert to every interaction, Sarah began testing the waters of community engagement, driven by a need for empowerment. She risked approaching the local shopkeepers with samples of her herbal blends, steeling himself against expectations to engage with a wider audience. Each rejection felt like a prayer unfulfilled, yet she remained undeterred, vision fortified against disappointment. The world outside her isolated sanctuary, once an intimidating expanse, now felt promising yet daunting. She began to cultivate not merely herbs but a burgeoning sense of self, learning to pivot just as nature did in response to the seasons. But soon, as momentum built, Sarah discovered unsettling rumors circulating in town about the businessman's intentions. His ambitions shifted. The dreams of development were evolving into an aggressive campaign for excavation. The encroaching threat raised stakes she had never anticipated, forcing her to grapple with a potential greater than her initial battle. Courageous, but deeply aware of the gravity of this situation, she felt the familiar tug of fear. This would not simply be a fight for a piece of land, it would be for her legacy, her daughter's future, and her grandmother's unacknowledged history. The shadows of doubt stirred again, whispering uncertainty. Was she ready to confront his ambitions head-on? As she readied her next steps, she couldn't shake the feeling that the time had come to face him, and soon she would find out just how resolute she had become. What awaited her at their next meeting would change everything. Sarah stood at the edge of her small garden, her hands deep in the soil as she planted seeds that felt like promises. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that danced across her work. This should have been a peaceful moment, but her mind was turbulent, caught up in the impending confrontation she had been rehearsing for weeks. The stakes had escalated, and uncertainty prickled at her skin. Would she have the strength to challenge the businessman directly? Each seed she placed in the earth symbolized a new beginning, not just for her plants, but for her life, and Lily's future. The herbal blends she'd been perfecting began to take on a new dimension. They were her battle, a way to claim her legacy, to ensure that her family's history was rooted firmly in the present. Yet, fear whispered persistently, suggesting that her efforts might be futile against someone as powerful as him. Her determination flickered each time she remembered his arrogant sneer, the way he dismissed her as a naive dreamer. But she was no longer that girl, she was a mother and a steward of the land, fiercely protective of both. Taking a moment to breathe deeply, she found clarity. The rumors of destruction from the businessman's development project fueled her resolve. The fight was not just for survival, it was about embodying the values her grandmother had held so dearly. Weeks of trial had shaped her into a figure of resilience. She had transformed product rejections into learning opportunities, and from embarrassment, she cultivated confidence. Sarah's herbal teas had slowly gained traction. Customers began returning, curious about new blends that whispered of nature's secrets. Perhaps this was the spark she needed to confront the larger issue at hand. Gathering her notes, she organized her ideas into a clear plan, something tangible that might influence her fragile community before it slipped into the businessman's grasp. She would present her herbs at the next local meeting, share her newfound knowledge, and rally support not merely as a businesswoman but as a protector of the community's heritage. She believed in her mission and began crafting a presentation that ignited her passion. However, as she prepared, doubt gnawed at her spine. Was she prepared to face a room of skeptics or worse, potential allies who might question her authority? Sarah spent sleepless nights rehearsing, the words pounding against her consciousness like a drum. She envisioned the confrontation with persuasive moments to sway the audience, convinced that if she could just reach one person, it would create a ripple of action. Then came the day of the meeting. The town hall filled with familiar faces, each representing varying levels of suspicion or interest. Sarah stood nervously at the front, her palms sweaty against the folder clutched tightly to her chest. She had gathered samples of her products, their enticing scents filling the room, mingling with the stale air. As she began to speak, she noticed the whispers. The businessman had positioned himself at the back, his presence looming like a dark cloud. Faces were split, some watched her with curiosity, while others reflected doubt. Fear surged and threatened to drown her resolve, but within the uncertainty, she felt a flicker of clarity. She was not merely fighting for herself, she was speaking on behalf of everyone who had belonged to this land, including her grandmother. In that moment, she released her tightly held breath, allowing her voice to resonate with conviction. She shared stories of her grandmother, of the legacy sewn into the fabric of their family, of the role herbs had played in their survival, and the rich history that preceded her. The room took on an electric quality as she unspooled her passion. But halfway through, the businessman raised his hand, interrupting. "We all know this land needs development, Sarah. Your dreams are charming, but they don't pay the bills." His tone was dismissive, echoing doubt that cut deeper than she had anticipated. In that instant, the stakes shifted. With every eye in the room on her, Sarah realized she had been preparing for the wrong fight. It was not just about herbs, it was about the very essence of what home meant. A steely resolve replaced her earlier uncertainty. What if we could find a way to honor both our history and the future? What if this land could be something more than a development site? With that, she seized the moment, launching into a vision that highlighted the intersection of preservation and innovation. As she spoke, a swell of energy surged within her, one that charged the atmosphere. Yet, it was clear the conversation was far from over. What she had begun in that room had the potential for both connection and conflict, and the businessman would certainly not back down quietly. The meeting began to dissolve into heated discussions, voices clashing. In the eye of the storm she had stirred, Sarah faced the reality of what lay ahead. The true fight was only just beginning, a battle that would force her to confront not only the businessman but also the doubts that had lingered from the start. As the commotion heightened, she realized this was more than just her fight. It was a pivotal moment that would change the course of her life and her daughter's for decades to come. Could she turn the tide against the looming threat, or would her dreams fade into another forgotten story? As the shouting grew, Sarah's heart raced. She knew she could no longer hold back. And in that chaos, everything hung in the balance, waiting for her next move. The chaos of voices swirled around Sarah, a whirlwind of conflict that threatened to sweep her away. Yet amidst the disarray, she found an anchor within herself, a flicker of unwavering resolve. Confronting her audience, she felt the weight of their stares, some filled with skepticism, others reflecting a glimmer of hope. The businessman's interruption fueled her determination. "Look," she said, her voice rising above the din, "this land has sustained us for generations. Our herbs, our methods, they are rooted in centuries of knowledge and respect. We can harness innovation without erasing history." The murmurs shifted, curiosity replaced some of the doubt. Sarah took a breath, realizing this was not just a plea but a challenge. She painted a vivid picture of what could be a community where modern development coexisted with the preservation of their heritage, where herbal traditions informed sustainable practices. She illustrated a plan that coupled economic growth with ecological mindfulness, using her own business's successes as a model. "Together, we can create a space that embodies our past while paving the way for our future," she implored, leaning into the sincerity of her words. Yet, the businessman was already rallying his supporters, pushing against her vision with the force of his influence. Sentiment is nice, but we live in a reality that mandates progress. Your little herbal shop isn't going to sustain this town. His voice thundered, drawing a chorus of nods from those easily swayed by his power. Despite the intimidation, Sarah stood firm, aware that one moment of weakness could unravel the momentum she had begun to construct. Her heart raced, but clarity crystallized in her mind. A realization echoed fiercely through her thoughts. She had something he could not leverage against her, something deeply personal: the history of her family, the legacy that had been entrusted to her. I understand the need for change, she countered, emboldened by her convictions. But true progress respects its roots. Can we really build a future if we forget where we come from? My grandmother taught me that healing begins in the soil, and I think we can find a way forward that honors that. With that confession, she briefly recalled her grandmother's face, her hands tending to the herbs, laughter mingling with the fragrance of crushed leaves, a memory of resilience and love. The image was vivid enough to reawaken her confidence, making her feel grounded. The room had shifted again, some faces softened, considering her words through the lens of tradition. But the businessman was unrelenting. You're romanticizing what can't be romanticized. We can't let nostalgia blind us to the realities of today. Was that all that mattered to him? Profit margins and development ratios? The pang of anger stirred within Sarah, compass for her resolve. You're right. Today is important, but it cannot exist without the foundation we build from our past. The future isn't defined by walls and brick, it's defined by how we treat the very earth we depend upon. She felt the energy in the room shift, uncertain but palpable, a blend of doubt and a desire for understanding. This was her moment to connect deeply, not just with those who believed in her but with those who were unyielding in their skepticism. Imagine a future where our development isn't just about numbers but about people. Where businesses thrive alongside our history, not in its shadow. This is an opportunity to lead, not just to follow trends set by outsiders. Heart pounding, Sarah pressed on, fusing her personal story with their collective existence, drawing connections between her struggle and the community's challenges. As the words poured out, louder than the chatter surrounding her, a few faces began to illuminate with recognition and empathy. But then she noticed a flicker of suspicion in some eyes, not just from the businessmen, but a lingering uncertainty in the crowd. Was it enough? The scales seemed to balance at a precipice. And as the evening wore on, the moments stretched painfully. Sarah had opened a dialogue, a chance for collaboration, but the businessman's unwavering demeanor quickly enveloped her hopes in darkness once again. Just as fatigue threatened to pull her under, she felt a singular clarity. She had ignited a spark, yet she knew the actual fight lay ahead, one that would challenge her patience, skill, and commitment. As the meeting reached its peak of discord with voices rising once more, she recognized her only option. Sarah would need to regroup, devise a strategy, and return stronger than before. The familiar fear clawed at her insides, but resilience surged in its place. She was not going to retreat. Tomorrow would demand even more. It would require her to regain not just the audience's attention but respect. And for that, she would need to dig even deeper within herself, confront new obstacles, perhaps even seek out allies in unexpected corners. One question loomed in her mind: could she truly transform this community's narrative without losing herself in the process? And as the tension crackled in the room, she knew she'd have to face not only the challenges of the businessman but also the shadows of self-doubt that beckoned her from behind. The time had come for her to reclaim her power amidst the turmoil. As the sun spilled its golden light through the window, Sarah awakened with more resolve than she had ever felt. The tumult of the previous evening had not only ignited her passion but also illuminated the path she was meant to walk. Layers of self-doubt peeled away with the dawning day, and instead, her determination crystallized around a singular purpose: to reclaim her story. She rose, each movement rippling with the promise of renewal. Her mind raced with solutions, ideas sparking like wildfire. It was crucial now more than ever to understand the perspectives of those resistant to her vision. Identifying their fears might provide the keys to unlocking their minds, and she needed to dig deeper into her own knowledge of the community's history. Drawing on her past, she plotted an approach that intertwined those memories with data, respect with innovation. Could her grandmother's teachings translate into a tangible action plan? Each herb steeped in heritage could serve as a metaphor for growth, illustrating how deep roots support robust branches. She grabbed her notepad, enumerating her ideas, her hand moving faster than her thoughts could keep pace. Partnerships with local farmers to create herbal workshops, initiatives that intertwined modern practices with ancient wisdom. But alongside optimism, a cloud of uncertainty lingered. The businessman wouldn't back down easily. She could feel the weight of his ambition pressing down against her. Her heart raced as she replayed his words, the way he dismissed her vision with practiced ease. Would any of her plans genuinely hold strength against his barrage? Stepping outside, she breathed in the crisp morning air, laden with the earthy scent of damp soil and rosemary. The world around her didn't feel as almost suffocating, it felt more like an invitation. Reflecting on the essence of herbalism, its healing power, both nurturing and defensive, she felt the connection deepening. Perhaps, she mused, embracing this duality in her strategy was essential. Healing did not come easy, it needed persistence and a firm stance. After breakfast, she headed into her shop. The familiar sounds of the bell jingling overhead comforted her, grounding her thoughts. The walls were lined with jars of vibrant herbs, memories captured in each one. Working methodically, she arranged a display that promised knowledge and partnership rather than mere sales. Signs labeled each herb's historical significance alongside its applications, igniting a curiosity for any passerby willing to delve deeper. Could organizing workshops transform the atmosphere? As she scribbled down plans, the idea of inviting local skeptics to experience herbal education began to flourish. What if they could witness firsthand the value of her practices? But shadows still lurked. Questions arose about whether she truly had the skills to lead such initiatives, whether she possessed the mastery to construct her vision in a way that would capture the community's heart. Reflecting on past failures nagged at her resolve. Was she merely deluding herself? Yet perhaps those failures bore lessons. Each misstep had taught her resilience, she had navigated those dark waters before. What mattered most now was commitment, to approach this challenge not with brashness but with a keen sense of empathy and understanding. Energized, Sarah grabbed her phone and composed messages inviting fellow herbalists and supportive locals to discuss her ideas for collaboration. If the businessman engaged in a constant campaign of self-interest, then she would offer a contrasting narrative rooted in community and shared knowledge. As the first replies trickled in, her pulse quickened, sensing a wave of possibility wash over her. Each message was a thread, weaving her closer to a tapestry of support she hadn't fully realized existed. But even as she read, a sense of foreboding mingled with her excitement. The businessman would surely retaliate against her efforts, and she braced herself for the confrontation that was destined to arise from her initiatives. That night, the clarity of her newfound purpose sliced through her. Cooking for one. Her body moved instinctively, but her thoughts were elsewhere. It was a fleeting moment of peace, and Sarah recognized that she was on the verge of something compelling, a battle that tested the very fabric of her resolve. As she set the table for dinner, the phone buzzed once more. The businessman had announced a town meeting, intent on quelling any potential rebellion against the development plans he championed. Alarm bells rang in her mind. This was the moment she needed to prepare for. And as Sarah stared at her reflection in the kitchen window, a warrior's spirit ignited within her. The time had indeed come for her to face him, and the challenge that awaited would reveal her strength beyond mere survival. Tomorrow, the gloves would come off. Tomorrow, she would step into the arena, armed with knowledge, determination, and an unwavering belief that true progress could only emerge from her roots. Would she be ready to make that stand? Morning arrived with a cloudy sky, casting a muted light over Sarah's kitchen. She busied herself with breakfast, but her mind flitted between thoughts of the upcoming town meeting and the weight of what was at stake. Today, she would not only defend her vision but also confront her lingering doubts. How she showed up physically and mentally would influence how others perceived her commitment. As she savored each bite, recalling the words she had crafted for her presentation, she felt invigorated yet anxious. This wasn't just about selling herbs anymore, it was about standing for something crucial. She visualized herself speaking confidently amidst the community, surrounded by the faces of those who had once doubted her. Each scenario brought a flutter of nerves, a tightening in her throat. Post-breakfast, she arrived at her shop and transformed the typically lively space into her preparatory sanctuary. On the floor, she laid out her notes, each page marked with colorful tabs, a tangible representation of her carefully calculated plan. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about understanding each individual's perspective. She had to make them see what she saw: the integral connection between her work and the local culture. As her fingers traced over her grandmother's handwritten recipes, inspiration struck. Each family recipe shared nutrition not just for the body but also for the soul, a lineage of wisdom that intertwined families and communities. Perhaps this idea could resonate with her audience, illustrating the heritage they shared. However, just as excitement swelled, a moment of doubt pierced through. What if her connections to the past weren't strong enough to combat the businessman's intimidation? The emotional scars from her previous failures crept into her thoughts, their whispers dissuading her readiness. She could almost hear the dismissive laughter he had projected during their last encounter. Determined to forge ahead, she began rehearsing her key points aloud. Each word struggled to escape her lips, and she noted the quiver in her voice. The feeling of inadequacy brushed closely against her resolve like a relentless phantom. Laughter? No. She refused to yield. She needed to draw strength from those past moments of failure to fuel her present. Her thoughts wandered from the past to a brighter, more equitable future for local entrepreneurs, a stark contrast against the businessman's exploitative vision. She could provide paths for the community to return to its roots while showcasing sustainable practices that truly informed health and well-being. With renewed clarity and focus, Sarah envisioned crafting the narrative, a tale of unity, resilience, and conscious growth. Each herb, she realized, represented not only sustenance but also life itself. If she painted her vision strategically, perhaps the townsfolk would rise from their apathy and reclaim their responsibilities toward their homeland. The hours slipped by as she meticulously committed her strategy to memory, and before long, it was time to make her way to the town hall. Stepping outside, she felt the brisk air filling her lungs, invigorating her reluctant spirit. The typical bustling sounds of the street faded as she focused fiercely on her goals. By the time she arrived at the meeting, anxiety knotted in her stomach. A wave of familiar faces surveyed the room, some murmuring, others casting dubious glances her way. When her gaze landed on the businessman, a chill descended. He stood at the front, exuding confidence, his smirk cutting through the room's tension like a knife. She would need to address him directly, counter his agenda with the strength she had uncovered in the mirror this morning. Watching him command the room, Sarah instinctively straightened her posture. The soft whir of conversation faded into the background, replaced by the palpable air of anticipation. This was not only a meeting, it was a battleground for the ideas and values she held dear. As he began outlining his plans, dismissing her ideas, Sarah felt the swell of determination rise. Drawing in a steady breath, she prepared to disrupt his dominance. Today was not solely about her ambitions, it was about showing that the roots of the past nourished the strength for the future. Instinctively, she stepped forward, heart racing, drawing upon every ounce of resolve within. The time had come to make her voice resonate, to reclaim her narrative and position herself as a beacon for change. But would she have the words to turn the tide, or would she falter under the weight of his intimidation? The answer lay just beyond her comprehension as she took a deep breath, ready to seize the moment. As Sarah moved toward the front of the room, the weight of expectation settled heavily upon her shoulders. Each step felt like a monumental decision, a commitment to an idea that could either flourish or flounder before the eyes of her community. She couldn't let fear dictate her words, no matter how palpable the businessman's intimidation felt lingering in the air. Her heart raced furiously, but as she caught the rhythm of her breath, clarity emerged from the chaos. She recalled her grandmother's teachings, particularly the quiet strength that she had embodied. The mere thought brought solace but also urgency. If she faltered now, it would echo in her community long after this meeting was over. "Thank you for this opportunity to speak," Sarah began, her voice steadying as the room quieted, the mixed expressions turning to her. She could see a flicker of interest from those who had once dismissed her visions, and she took a moment to appreciate that glimmer. It gave her the courage to continue. I stand before you today not only as a business owner but as someone who believes deeply in the power of our roots. She gestured toward the corner of the room where her herbs were displayed, vibrant and alive, reflecting the spirit of the town itself. These plants thrive from the same soil that nourished our ancestors. They tell stories of community, culture, and resilience. A few members of the audience shifted, some even nodded, and that small movement granted her a flicker of hope. Yet she could still feel the businessman's smirk burning into her, an ongoing reminder of the formidable presence she was up against. While some may see my work as merely a means to profit, I see it as a lifeline connecting us to our heritage. It's about more than just the herbs, it's about revitalizing our collective identity and empowering each other to find sustainable paths that honor our past. That statement seemed to resonate a little deeper. Cries of agreement rippled through small pockets of the audience, and the businessman's smirk began to falter. Encouraged, Sarah pressed on, weaving personal anecdotes into her presentation. She shared the story of her grandmother, who had used these herbs to heal local families, symbolizing the threads that bind their community together. In that moment, she felt the isolation of doubt ebbing away. The words flowed, each sentence building upon the last, and the realization hit her: this was her moment to reclaim the narrative. Every story she shared fortified the purpose behind her mission, solidifying her place among the skeptics. As she concluded her passionate appeal, Sarah focused on the businessman, her eyes locking onto his with intensity. To choose to support local businesses is to support our community and its history. This isn't just a competition, it's a commitment to our future. To her astonishment, the room erupted with applause and murmurs of agreement, washing over her like a surge of warm encouragement. Her determination felt palpable, igniting something collective, a recognition of the importance of her message. But the businessman, visibly rattled, quickly regained composure. His eyes narrowed as he stepped toward her, ready to dismantle the wave of support she had just cultivated. Is this really about the community, or just a veil to cloak your own failure? He spat, his voice cold and laced with mockery. The sharpness of his words stabbed through her invigorating moment, pulling her back into the depths of her self-doubt. The room's energy shifted, and Sarah could feel the tension tightening around her once more. In this critical juncture, she faced a daunting choice. Would she crumble under the pressure or dig deeper into her resolve? The crowd watched expectantly, their breaths held in unison as Sarah prepared to respond, aware that how she chose to define this moment could dictate the trajectory of her journey and the community's faith in her. The stakes were higher than ever, and Sarah was caught in the eye of a storm that could either fortify her spirit or leave her adversaries victorious. With her heart racing, she inhaled, locking eyes with the businessman once more, ready to make her stand. What came next would require every ounce of her newfound strength. Would she let his words silence her passion, or would she turn the tide of the confrontation? The weight of her response loomed ahead, and uncertainty danced alongside her courage as she began to speak once more. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat as the weight of his words hung in the air, sharp and accusing. She felt like a tightrope walker, wobbling on the edges of doubt and resolve, teetering between her vision and the chilling skepticism of the businessman. Despite the embarrassment that pulsed through her, an ember of determination ignited deep within, refusing to let his disdain extinguish her voice. Failure, she echoed, forcing herself to hold his gaze. Each syllable took shape as a tangible entity, laden with defiance. By whose measure? If we define failure by mere revenue, then every loving connection formed through these herbs would vanish. But I know my worth, and the worth of what we can build together. The businessman scoffed, but the audience's collective breath shifted. This was not just a rebuttal, it was a challenge to the fundamental fabric of his beliefs, the very essence of true value. Sarah's heart raced faster, adrenaline surging through her veins. She adjusted her stance, grounding herself as she prepared to unveil another layer of her vision, a layer forged by her connection to the land and its rich history. You see, she continued, her voice rising with conviction, these herbs aren't merely products to be sold, they're embodiments of our legacy. They connect us to those who came before us and those who will come after. My grandmother didn't just cultivate plants, she cultivated hope. And isn't that what a successful business should do? create hope, foster relationships. As she spoke, she sensed the stirring of a collective understanding amongst the audience. Faces softened, and skepticism began to wane, revealing glimmers of solidarity. A few people even nodded, and for the first time, Sarah could feel the momentum begin to shift. Yet, the businessman remained unmoved, his expression hardened as he attempted to reclaim the conversation. "And how much hope do you think you can sell? Empty promises will only land you in the ground like some forgotten seed." His words were laden with malice, but they no longer pierced as they had before. Instead, they acted as fuel to her fire. The trust she had built with the audience, even amid chaos, was palpable. It was her moment to rise, to embody the very spirit she had invoked. The time for explanation had passed, she needed to be transparent about her own journey. "Perhaps I have failed in some eyes," she began slowly, allowing vulnerability to weave into her message, "but I refuse to allow that to diminish what I know to be true. I've spent months wrestling with self-doubt, questioning whether this enterprise was worth pursuing. But every time I touch these herbs, I remember the generations that have tended to this land, those who relied on it, and I realize my path isn't about one person's success, it's about reviving the spirit of our heritage." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience, yet she knew she had to seal her argument. "If you measure success through monetary value alone, then yes, I may lack it. But ask yourself this: which is more valuable, money, or the impact we can have on each other's lives? My mission is to revitalize that impact." Silence enveloped the room, as if Sarah's words hung in the air like fragile glass, suspended between uncertain breaths. It was a moment where doubt faded, and she felt the weight of nothing but clarity. Her heartbeat steadied, each thump a reminder of her purpose. With a steadying breath, Sarah focused on the businessman, her expression resolute. "I ask you now to reconsider. Investing in my business is not merely a financial decision, it's an investment in an ideology, one that prioritizes connection over capital. One that teaches us that no seed remains dormant if it's nurtured." As she concluded, the audience erupted into a chorus of applause, a wave of affirmation crashing over her. But amidst that, she felt a flicker of anxiety. The businessman had not yet surrendered. She caught his narrowing eyes, calculating and sharp as he weighed her words. What would he do next? The unspoken tension pulsed, and Sarah understood that this confrontation wasn't just about her business. It was a battle of ideologies, one that could potentially redefine the trajectory of her life. Would she have to face him again, or would this be the last she heard of his disdain? The moment trembled on the precipice of resolution, and as Sarah looked out into the sea of faces, she felt an urgent call to action. It wasn't just a battle she fought, it was an entire awakening. Would this fight lead to her triumph, or would she find herself grappling with an unforeseen consequence, one that could alter everything she had worked toward? As the applause echoed through the room, Sarah's pulse quickened. The cheers were a sweet melody, laced with unease. She had felt the spark of change, the shifting tide, yet she knew this was just the beginning. The businessman's gaze still bore into her, as if he was a predator circling its prey. Could she truly shake the foundations of skepticism he represented? Even as recognition illuminated her path, doubts lurked in the corners of her mind. What if this was merely a fleeting moment of brightness, destined to be doused by the shadow of his influence? But the faces surrounding her, lit with conviction, urged her forward. She couldn't afford to falter. A gaping abyss lay beneath her tightrope, waiting to swallow her whole if she despaired. After the presentation, Sarah stepped off stage, her heart racing deeper with every pulse. Her phone buzzed insistently in her pocket. It was a text from her mentor, Marissa, a steady guiding force in the tumult of herbal entrepreneurship. "You did great. Still, be prudent." The businessman won back down easily, it read. The reality of her battle set back in, and she realized she had to confront the reality of negotiating not just with investors but with her own anxieties. Determined, Sarah made her way to the corner of the bustling venue, seeking a moment of solitude. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself among the interplay of voices and echoes of applause still lingering in the air. Here she could begin to formulate her next steps. What strategies could she implement to maintain this momentum? to build upon this connection with her audience? She thought of the herbs, their delicate forms symbolizing resilience, and drew inspiration from their innate ability to thrive in adverse conditions. Perhaps her fruitless encounters were akin to withering plants, not evidently successful but rich with potential. Was she merely watering the seeds of her doubts? Just as she began to ponder her next move, the businessman appeared at the edge of her vision. He moved toward her with a self-assured gait, his expression a complex blend of admiration and irritation. Nevertheless, it was his voice that cut through the air like a knife. "Impressive performance," he said, the sarcasm cloaked by a sliver of respect. "But you must know, this isn't over." "I wouldn't expect it to be," Sarah replied, forcing the confidence of her stage presence into her demeanor, a thin veil of calm over her mounting anxiety. "But neither am I backing down. This is my vision, and I won't disrespect the legacy it holds." The businessman's brow furrowed, intrigued by her tenacity. A flicker of something shifted in his eyes. Was it vulnerability? Perhaps mere curiosity? "Good," he stated curtly. "I thrive on challenge. Let us see how things unfold." As he turned to leave, Sarah felt a blend of triumph and trepidation. It solidified her belief that she had made a mark, igniting something within her adversary, even as uncertainty loomed ahead. After the event, Sarah returned to her cramped apartment, her mind racing with ideas and the looming figure of her opponent. She needed to sharpen her business acumen, learn to navigate the treacherous waters of entrepreneurship beyond ideology. As she stared at her reflection in the mirror, it dawned on her that this challenge was not merely external. It would demand her to confront the insecurities she had carried for too long. What concepts, ideas, and knowledge had she shunned due to self-doubt? Over the next few weeks, she immersed herself in everything from business strategy to marketing fundamentals while reconnecting with the roots of her heritage. She reached out to mentors, attended workshops, and synthesized her herbal knowledge with practical financial strategies. Each day brought fresh revelations, uncovering layers of competence she had long dismissed. With renewed purpose, she began drafting a proposal not just for potential investors but one that showcased her vision holistically, herbs intertwined with business ethics reflecting community values. For the first time, Sarah was not just an entrepreneur fantasizing about her dreams. She became a strategist, wielding knowledge and courage as her shields. Just as she felt the weight of progress enveloping her, an unexpected phone call disrupted her thoughts. A well-known herbalist offered to collaborate. The shift involved more than just personal growth, it was a call towards a connection leading to fresh opportunities. As Sarah mulled over the prospect, she sensed surging energy within her. This collaboration could fortify her standing, making a statement against the businessman who once belittled her. Yet lurking beneath the surface was the fear of missteps, a fear she would need to confront in a world that demanded precision. Determined to not repeat past mistakes, she prepared for this new chapter with a blend of excitement and caution. Each decision had the potential to elevate her, yet also to challenge her ideals of success. What necessary sacrifice would she face in pursuit of this partnership, and at what cost? The stakes were climbing higher, and she knew the true battle was just beginning. As weeks turned into months, Sarah felt herself evolving in even the most subtle ways. She had cultivated not just her herbs but her understanding of entrepreneurship and her place in the community. The collaboration with the well-known herbalist had fundamentally broadened her horizons. With her mentor's guidance, she began conducting workshops, fostering an interest in herbalism that transformed her from a struggling businesswoman into a community educator. The workshops became a beacon in town, drawing in curious attendees from skeptics to supporters. Sarah shared not only recipes of her herbal blends but stories of her lineage, her grandmother's legacy of resilience speaking through her actions. She watched as her community began to shift. Those who once doubted her were now eager to learn, asking questions, sharing their stories, and connecting the dots between her business and their shared history. The shift in perception filled Sarah with immense pride. A year ago, she had been a woman wrestling with self-doubt, caught between fear and aspiration. Now, as she stood before a group of eager learners, she felt solid confidence coursing through her veins. Her once timid voice now resonated as she led discussions that bridged the gap between modern practices and ancestral wisdom. Each workshop was a testament to her growth, a tangible demonstration of what she had achieved. The fruits of her labor were evident, reflected in the thriving community she had inspired around her herbal practice. Sarah had not only claimed her place but had transformed into a recognized authority in herbalism, championing a narrative of healing that stemmed from their shared roots. But amid the successes, challenges remained, particularly the looming threat of the businessman. His development plans had been stalled initially by public outcry, but his persistence was evident at each city council meeting. Sarah recognized that to truly secure her legacy, she needed to gather stronger allies and a more substantial community front against his ambitions. Her strategy became clear. She organized a community summit, inviting local farmers, educators, business owners, and residents to redefine their relationship with the land collectively. This was more than a business meeting, it was an invitation to stand united against exploitation. The gathering would showcase the economic potential of sustainable practices alongside the preservation of their heritage. On the day of the summit, anticipation hung in the air, a palpable energy igniting the room as members of the town gathered, eager to discuss their future. Sarah opened by reflecting on the journey they had taken together, the bond forged through shared passion and hope. She looked around the room, realizing that these were not just acquaintances, they were allies, the very essence of a community fortified. Today, she began, her voice threading through the crowd, we have an opportunity to shape a narrative founded on collaboration and history. Our herbal traditions and agricultural knowledge can drive our local economy forward, supporting each other instead of blindly following outside interests. As she laid out the potential benefits of collaboration, ecotourism, farmer-s markets featuring local herbs, and educational programs, the excitement in the room reached a crescendo. The businessmen would soon understand this was not just a fight for land, it was a declaration of their commitment to what made them unique. That evening, as Sarah tucked Lily into bed, she reflected on her growth. It wasn't merely her business successes that filled her with fulfillment, it was the profound connection she had ignited within her community. They had woven together the threads of her grandmother's legacy and paved the way for a flourishing future. Within that golden sunset, Sarah realized that she had transformed from a woman sitting at the brink of despair into a leader advocating for her community's value. Her fear had been transmuted into an unparalleled resolve. She had proven not just to those around her but to herself that her legacy wasn't just about herbs or business, it was about unity and the collective power of shared dreams. And as she pulled the blankets around Lily's shoulders, she knew that for the first time, each step she had taken stemmed from deep-rooted pride, authentic purpose, and unwavering confidence. This, she thought, was the true achievement, reclaiming her narrative and ensuring that it would resonate for generations to come. As Sarah stood at her window, looking out over the land that was both her past and her future, the stakes remained high, yet she felt ready. Ready to fight with her community, ready to confront the businessmen once more, and ready to cultivate a life rooted in resilience, one where hope blossomed into reality. The path ahead was illuminated by all that they had built together, an adventure she was eager to continue. This is your moment to draw inspiration from stories of resilience and growth. You need to subscribe now to the channel, don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that await you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for these transformative journeys. Comment below with your reactions and theories on Sarah's story and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.